Second. Hey besties and bosses. Ooh, this is up a little high. There we go. I think that's a little better. How are you all doing? Happy weekend. How was everyone's weekend? I've got Instagram with us as well. Let me make sure we're actually live in the page. Do I see myself? Because sometimes this doesn't want to work. So let's just make sure this is working and we'll get started. All right, I think this is working without a picture of me. Oh, there we are. Okay, we're on. Okay, then I'm gonna close this out. And hey, nice to see a couple people joining in on Instagram. Thank you all for joining. And thank you for joining besties and bosses now that we've got the tech stuff worked out. So what I wanna dig into today is some more of the mindset stuff. And I wanna particularly talk about one of the biggest ways I see entrepreneurs, creatives, coaches, the people I have the absolute honor, pleasure of talking to every day. The biggest way I see people crash and burn in their businesses and stall out and sabotage themselves. I have a feeling, I was telling Instagram, I have a feeling it's not what y'all think it is. Though I'd be really curious if you're watching now, if you're watching on the replay, to tell me what you think it is, because it'd be a fun little game to play. I have a feeling it's a little different than you think it is. And this is something I have a conversation with a client. I'd say at least once a week, this conversation comes up. So I have a feeling it's coming up for some of you as well. And I don't know who just joined on Facebook. Say, hey, we're just getting started. And what I'd love to hear, whoever's joining in, let me know if you have an insight or if you have a guess as to what this common way, the biggest way I see people crash and burn is. I'd love to hear what some of these guesses are. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start using an example to talk about this. We'll break it down a little bit. I'll tell you what it looks like. And then we'll talk about how to shift through this and how we can lean into this from a positive lens and use this for our benefit instead of crashing and burning. And hey, I don't know who's joined on the Instagram. So I'm gonna use running as an example. Many of you know I'm a runner. I love running. Running puts me in my happy place. It is something that I get creative ideas from. It puts me in flow. I mean, most of my content is written on a run. All of the great things happen when I run. But here's something that probably you don't know. I started running about 15 years ago in California when I still lived in LA. And when I started running, I was anything but a runner. I could barely get around the block without being out of breath. And the thought of putting on my sneakers and running was pretty much the most miserable thought in the world. There was nothing I wanted to do more or wanted to do less. And hey, Jeanette, nice to see you. Oh, I'm so happy to see you. I've been seeing some awesome posts of yours. Nice to have you here. Talking about a common way I see entrepreneurs crash and burn. So when I started running, the other thing you want to know is I started running in LA in the middle of the summer. LA weather is amazing, but the summer heat there can get up to, I don't know, about 105, 108 degrees. And I am not a hot weather person. I do really well in really moderate temperature where it's really nice and comfortable. Super hot temperatures, not my jam. So when I started running, it's the middle of summer, it's 105 degrees, and there is nothing I want to do less than put on my sneakers and go out for a run. But I wanted to be a runner. I have a ton of runners in my family. I'd heard all about runner's high. Many of you know I've talked openly. I have a proclivity towards depression. I had depression when I was younger. I was on medication for that and anxiety. And so running's also a really great way for me to give my brain what it needs without having to be on medication. Not that there's anything wrong with medication for any of you all who are in that space. But I knew that running was going to be something that would help me in a brain way, really help give me the serotonin, the things I needed that I wasn't getting from medication so that I could be more even, manage my moods. I also really wanted to get in shape, y'all. I was acting in LA, like, let's be real. I wanted to be in shape. I wanted that runner's high. I wanted all of the things that I could get from running. Healthy lungs, the endorphins. And I knew somewhere on the other side of that awful, shitty, hot weather and wheezing around the block that I could get that. But I had never experienced it before. And I think that's really important to know. And so when I started running, the way this looked was me going out, and I literally would start by just counting palm trees and telling myself I just had to make it to the next palm tree. I now run on a regular basis. I have done a half marathon. I can easily run 5, 6, 7 miles. No big deal. When I started, getting to the third palm tree was miserable. And I say this because this is the case for most of us. And what I find is whether we're learning to run in awful weather, whether we're trying to sell an online course or sell out a coaching program or sell a product or market a course or market our business or instill anything you want here. Plan a wedding, lose 5 pounds. If we're pregnant and we're waiting until the baby's gonna be born, whatever it is, there is always a time gap between the moment we think of something we want, the moment we start doing it, and the time in which we get the results we want. And it is in this time gap, and I call this the gap. It is this gap where I see the most entrepreneurial dreams go to die and the most people crash and burn. And I want to break this down a little bit because I think it looks a little different than most of us think. It doesn't actually usually look like quitting. So what most of us do, and what I see over and over again, and what I have to lovingly coach my clients on, and what I have to be really mindful of, is we're really good at deciding we want to do something. We know we want to run. We know we want the results. We're really good at daydreaming about the results. Running 5K or 5 miles, I think in kilometers because we do 5K races in my family, but running 5 miles, hitting a certain time in our runs, making a certain amount of money, having a certain kind of business, having certain type of clients, having a certain revenue each month. We're bringing it back to running, feeling really great, having those endorphins, feeling really great as we cross the finish line of a race. We have all of these things. We're really great at dreaming about that. Most of us are actually not so bad at starting. So I think a lot of us can put on our sneakers and go running for the first time. I think most of us can, get the website up or do the first thing we need to do to move our business forward. And then when the gap sets in, when suddenly we start to see, oh, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, and that next palm tree feels really far away, whatever that palm tree metaphor is in your business, this is where I see most of us crash and burn. And what I find a lot of us do is we look at whatever we're doing and we decide, because we're not getting the result we wanted fast enough, because we're not getting to the next palm tree fast enough, or because we're sweating a little bit and because it's uncomfortable as we're trying to reach that next palm tree. For those of you just joining, I'm using a running analogy, not palm trees in your business, though that's cool too. And let me know, because you're all very quiet, so let me know if this is making sense and resonating, if any of you have been there. What most of us find is as we're not getting to the next palm tree, as it's feeling a little challenging, as we're hitting some of that discomfort, what we make it mean is something about what we're doing versus realizing this is a very normal space to be in. This gap is the normal place. The gap is that, I think of it as a bridge from where we want to be, where we are to where we want to go. And this gap, this bridge we have to cross, is normal for anything we want in life. And what most of us do is we get a few steps onto the bridge and then we burn the whole bridge down. So what I also notice is most of us don't quit though. We still want what's on the other side. So we still keep daydreaming or dreaming or planning for what's on the other side of that bridge. We keep going for, I want to be in shape. I want the serotonin, if we're using the running example. I want the endorphins. I want the business that looks like X, Y, and Z. I want the clients. I want to sell out the course. But this strategy sucks. Running sucks. And so we make it mean something about what we're doing and we burn that down for something else. And so we constantly find ourselves in a loop of, well, running sucks. This is not getting me what I want. I'm not getting the endorphins. I'm not getting the runner's high. I'm not getting the body I want. I'm not getting the fast enough time. So there must be something wrong with running. So I'm going to stop and find something else. I heard a guru pretending I'm me in LA, but I heard a guru who has this cool workout class. I have a feeling if I do that instead, that's going to be better. And so we're constantly stopping and starting and inputting whatever strategy we want for something else. And hey, I don't know who just joined on Instagram. Say hey if you're with me and let me know, y'all, if this is making sense. And so we're constantly burning down that bridge we're on and then creating a whole nother bridge. The thing we don't realize is no matter what strategy we use, no matter what bridge we use, no matter what bridge we want to cross, whether it's in our personal life or in our business, there's always going to be a gap. We don't get to avoid that. I don't know anyone who is on the so-called other side, who has the results they want, who hasn't had to cross that bridge first, and who hasn't had to move over that bridge, cross over that chasm, whatever you want to call it. And every time we burn our bridge down and start on a new bridge, we go through this process all over again. And this is how I find a lot of people getting really frustrated in their business and really frustrated with themselves and thinking they're not good enough, thinking there's something wrong with what they're doing. feeling like they're stuck in kind of that Groundhog's Day cycle where they're doing the same thing over and over again. Hey, Kristen, nice to have you here. Let me know if this is making sense and resonating with you. I'm so happy to have you here. I find a lot of us are constantly going on a bridge, getting a few steps in, and when we're in the middle of that gap, which can feel really uncomfortable, we're burning it down only to find another bridge. And here's what I want to tell everyone. Every bridge works. So if we go back, I think sometimes it's easier to see this outside of business. If we go back to the running example, if I wanted to get in shape and get those endorphins, whether I wanted to start running or, hey, nice to have you on Instagram, or I wanted to do spinning, or I wanted to do a weight workout class, or I wanted to find some guru in LA who was doing, I don't know, they do a lot of really crazy, fun, hippie stuff there. And that was going to be the way that I was going to get into shape. All of those ways would work as long as I got on that bridge and started crossing over and moved through that discomfort, moved through that gap to get to the other side. No matter which of those strategies I would have tried, there was going to be a gap. There was going to be a time period that was going to probably feel really uncomfortable, probably where I was going to wheeze, probably where I was going to sweat a lot, probably where I was going to be the worst person if it's a workout class in the class until I get to the other side. And it's the same exact thing in business. And I think the sooner we can realize that and start to see that's really, really normal and start to normalize that, the less we get in our own way and sabotage our progress. Because otherwise what we're doing is we're trying something out, getting a few steps in that gap, we're not getting the results yet because there's usually a time lag, right? We start something, there's a time lag until we get what we want. We're deciding, well, shit, this doesn't work. So I saw that webinar last week, and I bet that webinar, that person said on this webinar, there's that thing they do. So you know what? Fuck this. I'm gonna go do what they said on that webinar. And so then we start whatever process that is. And then we find ourselves in a new gap, and there's that time lag between starting and getting the result. And we're in that time lag and we're like, well, fuck, this doesn't work either. So this is stupid. Let me try something else. And it becomes this perpetual cycle. Suddenly we're 3 years into our business and we're at the same place. Not because there's anything wrong with any of those strategies. Everything works, y'all. It's because we're stopping and starting. I'm gonna use Amazon Prime as an example, as another example just to paint the picture here because I love Amazon Prime. And I also think Amazon Prime is a really great example for so many things. It's a great example for our want for instant gratification, but it's also an example of how we can start to approach this gap and this time period in our business that is, y'all, no one gets to avoid this. I say this with love, but no one gets to avoid this. Hey, Rich, nice to see you. Talking all about the time gap in our business from any strategy we start and implement, from the start, that time gap in the middle to where it's a little uncomfortable before we ever see results to when we see results. We're talking about Amazon Prime. So Amazon Prime, if we think about Amazon Prime, if I want to order something on Amazon Prime and I find what I want and I put in my order, I know I'm going to get that order in 2 days. I can even track it. However, there is still a 2-day time gap from the time period I place my order, put it in, and the time in which I get my results, right? My product, my whatever I order on Amazon arrives at my doorstep. Hey, nice to have you. So we see that, right? That's what we're talking about here. So if we think about what I want a book on Amazon. I place my order. So that's my strategy. That's my action, placing the order. And then even with Amazon Prime, which is pretty much instant gratification, there's this time gap from placing my order, great, 2 days, at least for me, because I have the Prime, whatever it is, a week if you're ordering, till when it arrives on your doorstep. The difference with Amazon Prime and what most of us find do in our business, and I think this is the thing that we want to start really thinking about, is I know and I trust that once I hit order on Amazon Prime, whatever I order is going to arrive at my doorstep. I'm not constantly checking my email. I'm not constantly calling Amazon. I'm not constantly checking my front door to see if it's coming. And on that second day, whatever day it's supposed to come, when I wake up, if it's not there right away, I'm not like, well, fuck, Amazon Prime is a bunch of bullshit. My package isn't here. No way. I think the mail hasn't come yet, or whatever it is, UPS, whoever delivers Amazon Prime, it hasn't come yet. It just hasn't come yet. It's coming. Even in the rare occasion where my package maybe takes 3 days if it hadn't come, I would think, oh, well, I know this is coming. I know I've done my strategy right. I know I've put in my order. I figured out what I wanted. I put in my order. I placed it. So maybe there's something going on with the weather, or maybe I just need to check. I'm sure it'll be here tomorrow. silly example. Tell me if this is making sense. And I think it's really the same thing we have to start to apply with our businesses. So when we get clear on what we want, what is the result we want in our business? We implement a strategy. So we choose a strategy and we find ourselves in that time gap. We have to start to lean into trusting and knowing that the results are coming, whatever that time gap is, whether it's 2 days because it's Amazon Prime, or whether it's going to take a hot second because that is the nature of strategy, get in its momentum. We have to start thinking of it the same way we think about Amazon Prime, which is, I've shown up, I've put in my order, I have started taking this action. I'm in the gap now where it's on its way to me, and I have to figure out how I can believe and know and trust that the results are coming. And I have to stay in this place and act as if I know it's coming without starting to lose my mind and start sabotaging the progress I'm making. Because what most of us do is the equivalent to placing that order, and then 5 seconds after placing the order on Amazon, we lose our shit, we freak out, we think it's not working. And not only do we sabotage the current strategy we're doing and get in our own way, we then decide the whole thing's not working and we try by doing it a different way. And so we get off Amazon Prime. I have some weird examples today, y'all, but let me know if these are making sense. We get off Amazon Prime and we decide we're gonna order the same exact thing somewhere else. I got messages popping up. So instead of waiting for it to come through on Amazon Prime, we hop off and we're like, well, maybe Barnes & Noble has this, so let me go and order from Barnes & Noble. And this is how we stop and start and cause a really big delay in getting whatever result we want. The other thing that happens when we start to do this is we really start to erode our self-trust. I think one of the most important things as entrepreneurs, as creatives, as coaches, as any of us who are creating our own businesses and monetizing them, having self-trust. So that is that self-belief, but also that self-trust, really knowing and trusting and believing in ourselves is so imperative. And it's something we really have to work on strengthening. And every time we stop and start to look for evidence that something isn't working, we really start to erode that self-trust with ourselves. Self-trust can be eroded in a lot of different ways. This is why I think following through with the things we say we're going to is so important, because that's a part of our self-trust as well. But going back to what we're talking about here, learning how to trust ourselves in that gap, I think this is where, instead of seeing this gap as really uncomfortable, and instead of seeing this time gap that, y'all, is normal for everyone, I don't know anyone who is successful in any part of their life or business. Rich says, yep, this makes sense. And Kristen says, great advice and example. I have a client who could use this pep talk as well. Feel free to use the Amazon Prime pep talk with her. I feel like we all get Amazon Prime. The magic of the gap. I think one of the things we can start to do is first just normalize this and know this is normal. There is no one that we admire who is successful, who is creating the results, whatever's on the other side of the gap. I use the running as the example, right? You don't become a runner without showing up and running and getting through that gap of the discomfort and wheezing around the block. No one is a runner without first taking those steps. Show me a runner who's done it without that, and you can prove me wrong. But as a silly example, just like there is no one who has any sort of success in any area of their life who hasn't had to move through some form of a gap. The trick with this gap is really starting to know it's normal. And then I think the magic that starts to happen is starting to look at it a little bit differently and starting to see this as an exercise where we really get to start to lean into our self-trust, lean into our belief. And I think this is where the magic happens, because when we can show up for ourselves and believe something is possible and coming before we've ever experienced it, before we've ever had the evidence, y'all, this is when we become unstoppable. This is when you not only create the results that are at the other end of this strategy or on the other end of the Amazon Prime order, input example here, but this is when you become unstoppable in life, because this is when you learn how to be what you need to be and trust yourself and believe in whatever you're doing before you have evidence. This is how you can create anything you want. It is like magic, but it's really tough for most of us because most of us want the evidence first. We want evidence first that this is going to work. We want the evidence that everything's going to be okay before having to sit through that gap. And it doesn't work that way. And I think that's why it becomes a little challenging. To see if we have any other comments. So I think if we can start to reframe this a little bit and see it as a really fun personal challenge to start to lean into self-trust, self-belief, and really start to look at what is on the other side and how can I believe now before having the evidence that it's coming. How can I start to look at my business and those results I want? What do I need to do? Who do I need to be? How do I need to show up to know that it's like that Amazon Prime order? It is on its way before I've ever experienced it. And I feel like that's a little bit mind-bendy, but I think that's where the magic in this is and where we can all lean into. And if we can start to do that, we can replicate this in every area of our business. And I'm trying to think of another really simple example. I'm going to use weight loss as an example. Not that I think weight loss is anything anyone needs to focus on, but I think it's just something most of us have. It's kind of just a cut and dry thing. If you're wanting to lose weight, I think it's easy to know there's a million different strategies, and it's easy to know what you want. And whatever strategy you start on, I mean, there's a whole industry that is based on throwing strategies at us for this. Whatever strategy you will take will work. I think where the magic lies in all of these is being in the middle of it and believing and trusting in yourself enough to be the type of person who's going to follow through and can get whatever weight loss results they want. I kind of hate the weight loss example, y'all, but we're in it now, so we're going to talk about that. Only because I don't want to perpetuate the story that anyone needs to focus on that kind of garbage. However, I think we all understand what that concept is and understand what we mean there. It doesn't matter what we plug in. It doesn't matter if I tell you for that you have to do burpees every day or not eat gluten or eat less dairy. We know that if we input certain strategy and we show up for it and we can believe that we're worthy of the results on the other end and believe they're coming ahead of time, we can stay in that time gap long enough to get the results. Versus what most of us would do in that place, I think, because it's not fun to do any of that, is a week or two in, say this doesn't work because we think it's not actually possible for us to get the results on the other end, and we burn down the strategy and make it something to do about the way we're trying to get it. Versus, let me just stay in this and believe it's coming. I think I'm hitting all over the head with this, so hopefully this is making sense for you. I'm trying to think if I had any other notes here for you. This is the other note I wanted to say. If we're willing to stay in this gap, what we're calling the gap here, if we're willing, and hey, I see Belinda online too. Hi, Belinda, nice to have you. If we're willing to stay in this time period where it is uncomfortable and know that this is normal and lean into that belief and lean into knowing the results are on the way before we've ever had evidence, the other magic that happens in this gap, I believe all growth happens through discomfort, but I also believe this is where we really get to start to refine and make things work for us, where we really get to become experts at something. So let's use the running example because that's what we've been going with from the beginning. If we're willing to sit in that time gap, we start to get to see day after day, well, isn't that interesting? Hey, Belinda. After I hit a mile, I realized that, this is such a weird example again, but I realized I start to get a pain in my leg. Maybe this means I need to start stretching more, or maybe this means the way I'm eating before my runs isn't working well, or I need to bring water with me, or I need to sleep better before my runs. We start to see where we can start to refine and tweak what it is we're showing up for so that we can get those results on the other end. Amazon Prime, maybe we start to see, well, that's interesting. I see this works really well, but I've realized if I look and search with some more specific keywords, I can get exactly what I want instead of kind of sort of what I want because I went down a rabbit hole on Amazon Prime. Y'all get what I mean. I think you get what I mean. And says, what are some of the tips that help us keep the faith? I'm going to answer that in a second. I think that's a great question. Let me real quick just finish what we're talking about here, which is I think what we can do when we're in this gap is really start to mine it for the gold of how can I now, instead of trying to constantly find a new strategy, find a new way of doing this, how can I layer on top of this and refine and tweak what I'm doing so it becomes easier, so it becomes faster, so that I can get to the other side and get those results in such a smoother, more faster way. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, and then we've got KP. What's your name, sweetie? Because I'm gonna butcher what your tag is here. I think one of the ways to keep the faith here, I think there's a few things here. So I think more than anything, mindset. So I think mindset work and finding what works for you to strengthen your mindset and to really lean into that belief that you're good enough, that the results are on the way. I think knowing that it's normal, and I think knowing that pretty much any strategy for everything works if we work it. So if we're talking business instead of running, Kristen. Hey, Kristen. Oh, we've got all sorts of Kristens online today. This is fun. We've got a Kristen day. So Kristen, I think for almost everything, we're going to use business instead of the running example since we're talking business here. Almost every business strategy works. I mean, there are ways to work them more efficiently. Absolutely. There are sometimes gaps we don't see, and sometimes we need support to find what those gaps are. But at the end of the day, pretty much everything works if we work it. And so I think knowing that going in, just like we know every workout, if we commit to that, whatever the workout is going to get us in shape. So half of the battle is believing and trusting whatever we pick, that deciding that we're going to show up for it no matter what. Let me know if that makes sense, because I think and deciding that there isn't a better strategy. I think this is actually a really great way to think about this, and where some of us get trapped with this as well is we commit to a strategy, a business strategy, so going live or working out, running, and we decide halfway in that there's a better strategy, not even because ours isn't working, we just think there's something better. And I think there's a lot of power in, even if our strategy isn't the best, staying in it until we get results. So if it's live streaming, if it's podcasting, if it's writing blogs, if it's running every day, instead of halfway through where we're starting to see some traction, deciding, well, yeah, but this isn't happening fast enough, I'm going to do something else, really staying committed, even if it isn't the best, and knowing that's how we make anything work for us in life. Anything is, even if there is a shiny or better strategy, staying in it, and that everything can work for us that way. So I think that's the first thing, just in terms of keeping the faith, is really just deciding, I know that sounds overly simple, but just deciding this is what I'm doing. This is the strategy I'm committed to, and I'm committed to it. I'm deciding it's going to work until it works, and I'm going to figure it out until it works, and that everything I do, I can figure out, or I can find the support to figure it out. And then I think on the back end of that is the mindset we have to do to really be in belief that we are capable of getting results, that we're worthy of getting results, that we're good enough to get results. Because a lot of times then when a strategy isn't working for us, it has more to do with the gap here between our two ears than the gap we're talking about from point A to point B. So that's when I think talking about mining the gap for gold, where the magic is, that's when we can start to really see, and thank you, Kristen, is actually a perfect question to talk about one of the things I want to talk about here, which is when we're in that space, that's also the magic in terms of, okay, if I'm not getting the results I want still, then what's going on? Because a lot of times then it's something going on with our mindset. We have a fear. We think we're not good enough. We're worried about being an imposter. We're worried about what happens if I get this success. We think if we get all of these clients, we're not going to be able to handle them. We're going to lose all our freedom. Insert whatever fear or insecurity we have. But how powerful is that if we stay in something long enough to uncover what's really going on so that we can address that, versus, oh, this isn't working, there must be something wrong with the strategy, let me just try something else. We never get to the place where we figure out what it is we actually need to address so that we can get to the other side. Kristen, let me know if that makes sense. So I think that's kind of a long answer to your question, but a few things just in terms of what to focus on to keep the faith, and also what to start to notice when we're kind of in that mucky middle spot that is normal, to start to see what's coming up for us, because that's how we create shifts. That's how we create magic. Kristen says super helpful. I'm trying to think here of what else. Oh, the other thing I would say for you, Kristen, and for everyone in terms of keeping the faith, I think the other thing also is, and I think this is what I was saying at the beginning, I think a lot of us think that it's quitting that gets most of us out of the game. I think remembering that this is actually a really common thing, a way we psych ourselves, or a way we trick ourselves into thinking we're building momentum, is starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping, because we tell ourselves, I'm not quitting what I want to do. I still have the main goal in mind. I still want to run the 5 miles, build the business, make the money, plan the wedding, lose the weight, whatever the thing is. And so we actually tell ourselves, no, I've been doing all the things. I'm showing up. When really we're stopping. And I think if we can know this is a common form of sabotage, we can also start to catch it and see when Kristen, just to talk about the faith part, when we're in a place where like, I want to stop what I'm doing, burn it down and try something else, where we can really then get curious and say, so this means I don't have faith in what I'm doing. I actually don't have a whole lot of faith in myself right now. Otherwise, I'd stay put and I'd keep moving forward. So what's going on with me? What's coming up here? What's happening in my mind? And I think that's how we can not only keep the faith, but when we're losing the faith, get to see why we're losing the faith, versus just blindly telling ourselves, I have faith, this is gonna work, this is gonna work. Because I'm all for affirmations, but sometimes we actually need to see what's blocking us from being able to believe those affirmations. All right, that was a very roundabout way of saying that. So Kristen, I hope that made sense. Kristen says super helpful. Awesome. And those of you on Facebook, I don't think I have more comments, but let me know. This was a very circuitous conversation today because it's a circuitous conversation. Let me know if you all have any questions before we hop off. Really what I want to close with here is to remind everyone that, first of all, you're all so much more capable. We are all so much more capable than we give ourselves credit for. Whatever you are thinking you want, whatever you want to create in your business, in your personal life, it is possible. There is a strategy, there is a way to make it happen. And usually the strategy is not that complicated. I'm not saying it's easy, but usually the strategy isn't that complicated. It's what's up here that makes it complicated. And so just remember and know that the gap is normal. No one gets to avoid it. And so when you find yourself in that gap, which is that time period from deciding you want something to actually seeing the result and having it happen, when you started moving towards it and you're kind of waiting for it, know that that is normal. Think of Amazon Prime. It's coming. Kristen says, thanks, Kim. You are so welcome. Know that it is normal. And that's where we get to double down on what we're doing versus burning it down. And I think the faster we can lean in when we're feeling that gap, the faster we can lean into the discomfort, the faster we can lean into doubling down on what we're already doing versus trying to look outside ourselves for a secret or something else to do, the faster we move through the gap and get to the other side and get those results. And so I think that's where momentum comes from. And I think it's just, again, it's tricky because we haven't always experienced that evidence yet. And so if you want to borrow evidence, I think that you can borrow evidence from me. I have been in this so many times before, y'all. So I'll give you all the evidence you need. This happens with everything. And the results are always coming if we stay and hang around for them. So stay on your path. That is what I want to say to all of you. Stay on your path and stay in that gap and trust and lean into your trust and your self-belief, and get curious when that's being eroded a little bit. And I also want to close with, I have a free training coming up in 2 weeks. It's going to be a 5-day training. I'm calling it the 5 M's of money making magic. That's a mouthful. I do not have the landing page for it finished yet because, let's be real, y'all, I'm going to be very honest. I was finishing up my taxes this morning. I was behind on my taxes, so I'm a little behind on all the landing page stuff. So I will put that Facebook, I'll put that in the group in a few minutes, and Instagram, I'll drop a link for it, but it's gonna be a 5-day free training. We're gonna walk through the 5 M's of money making magic. You can guess that one of them is mindset, and I'll leave the rest as a surprise. I'm really excited about this one. What I want to do with all of you is walk through and really simplify what we need to focus on to create money in our business, to build a business we love that also makes us money, so that we can have those both sides, the side of that passion, that love, what we want to do, and the income generating side, and really boil it down and simplify it so you know exactly what to focus on. And we're going to go through that so we can hang out for 5 days as well. So sign up for that. I will have those links for you very shortly. If you're watching on the replay, let me know if you have any questions. And I will be back next Monday with another topic for you all. I've got so much love for you. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thanks for sharing in this conversation, and kisses. All right. Bye, Instagram. We're going to share that, and then bye, Facebook.